Well, hey, welcome to another episode of Church Leadership Lab. It is good to be with you, whether you're listening to this, whether you're watching this. I am Scott, one of your hosts, and we have our other host, Casey. You want to say hey?
Hello.
Perfect.
That's it.
That's it. Hello. And today we are super excited to have Jonathan Deatherage with us. Jonathan's been in church media communication for a number of years now, since 2008. He has a master's degree in media communications, so he's pretty much the only authority you need to listen to on these things. Kidding. But he served as communications director, both in nonprofits, in church settings, and now consults with churches all over the country. Not only that, but on technology, on software, and all of that. So Jonathan, welcome to the Church Leadership Lab.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Yeah. Hey, one thing that we like to start off with, we just kind of read your bio, and that's like your bio that goes on your Instagram bio. I don't know if that would be, but if you like wrote a book, right, that would go on the back of the book or whatever. But there's always some things that like you leave out. So what's something that your friends, your family might know about you that like you would leave out of the back of the book bio?
Well, it's funny you should ask. The two things that my coworkers actually know about me is that I'm a font nerd. So anytime we have something new come out, I'm always like, hey, can we change the font so that I don't really like that one? And then the other thing is I love dad jokes. I actually come from a long line of dad jokers.
Okay.
My grandpa was a punster. My dad is a punster, and I inherited the genes. And ironically, my daughter, who's 14, one of my four kiddos, just she'll roll with puns. We'll just kind of have a pun war. So,
dude,
dad jokes.
That's a gift. I'll say, like, some people, like, their mind just work for puns. And like, I had a friend that it was like he couldn't not come up with them.
Yeah.
So I feel like you're probably the same.
Yeah, I have to turn it off. In fact, I had a hard lesson in 7th grade when I was just ripping one after the other in English class. My teacher was finally like, just stop, just turn it off. That's what I learned. You're not always welcome.
Yeah. You mean everybody doesn't love this? What are you talking about?
That's right. I think this is brilliant.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I also think it's I share your fontness. That's not fontness. It's fondness. That was going to work really well.
Well played. I see where you're going.
Fonts, but
that was like a double hit right there.
Do it again.
I feel the love.
It was close. It's fine. I'm going to skip it. All right. I love font as well. Typeface, whatever you call it. So we're with you.
Do you ever play the game, like go to a restaurant and name that font?
Sometimes, yeah. I'm not as good at that though. I have a friend who is, and it's remarkable.
That's going deep, man.
Yeah, that's getting in the weeds. But it also proves that you're really good at what you do, because communications, especially digitally, it really matters what it looks like, which is font. So
fonts matter. That's right.
Full circle.
I want to know if your master's final included name that font. Is that how you get a master's? Is name that font?
No, believe it or not, it was mostly you just had to do Photoshop. It was a lot of that.
Nice.
But fonts are in there. Pictures. That's right. A really good PowerPoint presentation.
Yep.
Well, that can be your next degree. That's fine.
Yeah. I thought of like 3 different tangents, and then I was like, we should probably get into like our actual conversation. So we'll save them for another time. But well, let's kind of dive in, especially, what our conversation is going to center around, which is communications is kind of everything that you have quite a bit of expertise in. So, obviously you've spent time, we talked about working in a communications role in a church. So for you, like thinking about that time, what were some highlights? What were some things that you loved about that? And then what were some challenges for you, but then also maybe that you see in broad for that role?
Yeah. Well, for me, it was really great. Just there were so many highlights because as we already kind of talked about, that was really my area of specialty, just jumping into church communications and media and things of that nature. So for me, I got to lead a team of about 3 or 4 other folks. Team kind of grew a little bit and shrank a little bit later, but really just getting to cast vision of here's how we're going to do that sermon series. Here's how we're going to do the podcast. I've actually been on the other side of the mic several times.
Nice.
So it's weird to be on this side. But then just all the other fun things like working through the graphics, the social media strategy, and really being at a church, the pastors even kind of welcomed me in to have a voice in the discipleship process because they saw how what they were doing in adult education really flowed into what I was doing in communications, and how they needed to really sync well so that the congregation was in tune, aware, and tracking. As far as challenges go, though, I mean, I think it's funny. As many folks of our listeners will probably know, that the church makes decisions slowly. So when you're in a media communication role and you're like, I just see that we need to do this, we need to change this thing, that font looks terrible, can we get a new sign, please? The decisions go a little slower. So really just learn how to be patient with that.
Yeah.
Also, just being like the only media professional kind of in that little bubble on church staff, I always thought, like, I was there for about 5 years and I just kept having this thought of like, it's really weird that I have this job, where like I am a paid church staff member who's not a pastor,
Yeah.
So there were times when, there were some challenges just working through the pastoral role of like, hey, we're here to shepherd people. We're here to like, I'm just going to go meet with that guy and we're going to have lunch and it's going to be great. Very soft and tangible, which is good. That's what they're doing. But I was on the other side of it saying, yeah, but Sunday's coming and I have a bulletin to produce. Can you just write me like a paragraph of what your event's going to be about in 3 months so that people can come? So there's that tension, like, go have fun, go to lunch, but like when you get back, can you just write that for me?
Yeah. You know what was interesting to me as you were talking is like that tension between, and because you mentioned getting brought into like some of that discipleship strategy and like, here's what we're doing. Because I think as you were saying that, what I was realizing is like, man, it really is your communication. And just like as we talk about that too, like for anyone listening to this, communication, we're not just talking about like how you talk or the words that you use. That's obviously important, but digital communication, the way you show up places, all of it's all encompassing. But it was just interesting to me because really that is like, that's a crucial part of a church's discipleship strategy. How we're actually going to talk about this, what we're going to say, when we're going to say it. Do you feel like it's common for that role to be brought into like that kind of high level process of the strategy and thinking through it?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I was there, so I'm in the Dallas Metroplex area, and there was kind of a group of us that would get together every now and again from across different churches. And it was always the most interesting thing to say, okay, where do you sit in the org chart? Okay. And who's under you? It's always sometimes it was like where I was kind of like senior pastor, leadership team. And then there was me, right? Some guys like they're in the leadership team, so just varying levels of access was one of those things, and influence. But really just kind of like, we want to be in the conversation. It's helpful for us to be in the conversation. But man, it's all always, and all different kinds in different churches.
Yeah.
Well, thinking about strategy in terms of a church, even that is possibly kind of strange. We use a lot of these business terms in the church world, but they are important to be efficient and really effective. So just the word strategy itself in a place of ministry, that even might be a stretch for some leadership teams. So I love that you're even talking about strategy being important and where strategy fits into even that org chart. So even the word org chart, like in a church, that's a stretch. But I like that you're having that conversation and how important it is. But Jonathan, speaking specifically about your experience, specifically about digital strategy, what is super important from the positions that you've been in and even now where you are today? What is super essential or critical from a digital perspective fitting into that overall communication strategy?
Yeah. It's interesting. I think often with churches and ministries, they're coming from their perspective of, hey, this is what I have to offer the world, right? Um, I used to work for nonprofit for about 3 years, and it was easy for them to say, hey, this is what we're doing. Isn't it awesome? Isn't it great? And it was awesome. Or that the church role is like, hey, these are the ministries that we have to offer. Don't you want to come be a part of it? Um, and so often the one pivot that I had to do to shift the conversation was to say, okay, what does your audience need to hear? So it's like, hey, come around to the other side of the table and see it from this perspective. And then what you actually need to communicate gets really simple, gets really clear. And so it streamlines a lot of that fluff, so to speak.
So being more of a listener than a talker.
Yeah, and knowing your audience, I think a big deal is churches can do a lot of things. I mean, there's so many media avenues out there. I mean, just name the top 3 most active social media channels. Like, you can go crazy just keeping up updated posts on those.
Yeah.
Keeping up with your website, keeping up with your email, mass communication. There's so many things that churches can be involved in. It really just kind of saying, okay, but who's our target audience? Who's that person we're trying to reach? Who's that family? Like, I would even go as far as like, put a name and face. Like, who's that person? What channels are they tuning into? Are they on YouTube? Go to YouTube. Are they on Facebook? Go to Facebook. Are they looking at your website? Make sure it's really, really good. Just that cuts out a lot of fat. We're like, okay, this is who we're trying to reach. This is where they are. This is what we're going to do.
How much do you think empathy plays in that? Like being able to, so not only like know who that is, but like, I think of somebody who maybe comes to your website for the first time, somebody who comes to your service, right? And sits there for the first time. Like, what role does that have to play in being able to understand where they're at, so that you can like you said, like kind of reverse engineer the communication so that it actually lands versus, well, here's what I want to say, so we'll say it. And
yeah, that's a great question. Not being a terribly empathetic person myself, I'm gonna use my imagination here, Scott.
Okay.
Or translate. I like Casey's word of listening, just kind of, or even just that example of, okay, if this is for somebody in the pew, I'm going to go to that seat in the pew and sit down and look from their perspective. Oh, I can't see the screen.
Yeah.
Or, oh, the screen looks really, like, just literally getting in their perspective sometimes, but also mentally saying, okay, I'm, so-and-so, I've got this many kids. This is my life. I'm looking at this on my phone in the car on the way to soccer practice. I'm not going to watch the whole sermon.
Yeah.
Give me a 30-second clip. Give me a quote that's going to give me a little pump so I can, be patient with the kids in the back of the car. Maybe like, just understanding. Always a good dad joke, Scott. Always.
I love that.
Yeah.
I wish I could remember who this was, but I read a book or heard a podcast or something about a CEO that had a habit of the empty chair. Someone is going to listen or watch this and they're going to know what I'm talking about. And I'm like, that was it. But they had a little plastic chair that they put on their desk to represent either the customer, the board member, whoever it was that was going to read this message. And like a physical representation of who would be in that chair that we think we're communicating to, who's watching this commercial, who's reading this article. If they were in that chair, would we say it differently? Or would we use the same words? Would we use different images if they were there? So I love what you said, like physically going to sit in the seat, walking through the kids area. Would anyone on their first visit, would they have found the restroom? No, because our signage is terrible or we don't have any. I love that physical, put yourself in those shoes, especially if empathy isn't just a natural gifting. Well, get up and walk it. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, Casey, you did say, sorry, Scott, but no, you brought up it reminded me of an experience that we had. So when I was on church staff, signage, what did become an issue. And we literally had to do that. Like, okay, I've been coming to this building for 4 years. I know where the bathroom is. It's not hard.
Yeah.
I know where I remember which parking lot I parked in, but to be like, okay, I'm going to pretend like I don't. I'm going to walk this hall. Why is that sign right there? Wait, shouldn't it also say this? And we had to walk it so many times and bring in so many different people because you just get used to it. And I know with some of our listeners, that can be a problem too. It's just that physical, like what does the visitor, the first time visitor, actually see? Can they find the bathroom? Can they find the worship? Can I drop off their kids? Can they get back to their car? And that can be hard because it's so familiar, you know?
Yeah. There's a lot of power, I think, in like just having some, we'll just talk Sunday morning particular, but having some Sundays where you can just attend your church. Yeah. So even if you're on staff, you work there, you know, whatever it might be. And that was me for a long time, but I had very few where I actually just attended. But the ones that I did, I couldn't help but be like, oh, this feels a little different than I thought it felt, you know, to everyone sitting here. That's really good.
You see how the bulletin gets handed out.
Yeah.
You're like, I spent all week making that bulletin look amazing, and you did what with it? Yeah. Or
you erased my font?
I don't have any. Yeah, exactly. Or we did a practice when we were trying to like decide, should we keep our physical bulletin? My team were like, just attend. Now, when you leave, watch. How many people take that bulletin and set it down? How many people throw it away? How many people actually take it beyond the sanctuary and hold on to it?
Yep.
We learned a lot just by doing that.
That's really good. One of the places where I think this probably happens often in a communication, in like the world of communication, church communications, where it's sort of like we set it and then we don't really experience it, do it, is a church website. I feel like there's a lot of energy put towards creating one, thinking of one, maybe even redesigning one. And it's like, you do all of that, you get it up and running, and it's like, cool, on to bigger and better things. And that thing just kind of goes, right? And so then what happens is you see a lot of church websites that are either out of date or even, I sometimes wonder, have they thought through them with the people who are visiting these in mind, right? So new people looking to find out about the church, whatever. So I guess for like, what have you seen? You've worked with a lot of churches. You've done especially a lot of stuff in that world. What have you seen that are some common mistakes that people either have on their website or get up and keep going? And especially, are there any that are like low hanging fruit, easy fixes that somebody could, you know, call their, friend or staff member, whoever does the website, and say, hey, can you fix this for us?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I love that question because I've seen lots of church websites and there's just some easy hits that I can, you know, if you want me to pick at your website, I can pick at these three things, right? Again, we're looking at we're in the seat of your church person. Like we're talking about your visitor. Okay. They don't know anything about your church. Their question is going to be, can I belong here? Can my kids belong here? Can I grow here spiritually? They're asking that question. And they're going to find an answer really quickly, whatever's on your website. They're going to look for the story of your church. But the first thing that I'm going to look at, if I'm kind of grading your website, is that top line navigation. Is it clear? I know it sounds really technical, but as people kind of look across lots of church websites, if I'm new to town and I'm just kind of church shopping, I'm going to want to see the church staff. I don't know why, but we found that it's like one of the second most visited pages on the website is like, who's leading this church? Who are these people? Are they crazy? Am I going to grow here? Or they look like they're well educated? But like knowing where to find that should be in the about section. That's just where people look for it. You know, thinking through that visitor list, like how do I make this really easy for visitors to find ministry? Like they're going to check in their kids. They're going to want to know how to do that. They're going to want to know how to park. Just saying, how do I make that within 2 to 3 clicks and just like hit it real easy? That's one of those things. Another one is when you come to that homepage, again, it's that initial look of, can I belong here? Too often I see churches that have that top banner image, a picture of their church building. Like it's Google Maps. Like, okay, I will drive up and identify your building. That is the right building. And it's a missed opportunity. I mean, don't get me wrong. Some churches are really beautiful, and I've seen some really great pictures that are beautiful churches. But I think I always would prefer to see people Because if I'm a new person, I'm going to go to a cool building, sure, but really, the church is about people, right? So as a visitor, I may be looking for people that I'm like, oh, I can relate with that person. They're doing things. I'm like, I could see myself doing that. That looks like spiritual growth. Okay, that's kind of what I'm wanting to do. So they're already trying on your community as you're telling the story visually. Like that's crucial. Too often I see churches also they'll do scrolling announcement slides in that top banner. It's like that's kind of too soon. Not that it's bad information. It's like, you just met me. Don't invite me to an event.
Whoa. Yeah. Let's finish the appetizer first.
That's right. At least shake my hand or something.
Yeah.
I love that. I went to, I was trying to visit a friend's church very recently. There's not a building on the website, but all I wanted to find were service times.
Yeah.
Fairly larger church, beautiful website. For the life of me, I could not find the service times. And I had that like first time visitor moment of like, y'all, that's kind of like the most important thing is, well, I can go to Google Maps to find your address. So your contact information, but when do I come? Like that was the hardest thing. And it's the only piece of information I went to the website to find. And I couldn't, it was so buried. I went, oh man, oops. So I bet you have a long list of maybe like what not to do, a checklist of.
Well, and you bring up a great topic, Casey, of like, if you're a church leader and you're like, okay, I see that maybe my website's not visitor friendly, go ask a visitor.
Yeah.
Hey, I mean, like, don't you wish when you're sitting there at that website, like, who can I email to say, just give me the service times? Like, you would have done that. So I think often you can be surprised as a church leader, just asking like, okay, what was your experience? And getting their perspective really can be eye-opening.
Yeah.
You said something I've never heard this said this way, and I think it's really interesting as especially a lens to look through when you're designing a website, when you're thinking through even a first-time visitor experience, all of that. But I think what you said was like, people are trying on our congregation. Maybe you said it with more elegant language, but that's just like that whole, like, just that concept. Like, people are trying to see, does this fit? Like, do I fit into this? Is this, can I belong here? And I think that's that can change a lot, because sometimes a website's like, well, it just needs the house information, which obviously it does. We just talked about that. You need some of that. But if it's just purely like, here's some info, logistics, I think that's a really interesting way to think about that whole strategy and lens.
This is totally not different topic, but not to put you on the spot, but we've got websites and apps and then in person. And all three of those kind of communicate similar information, but they served different purposes. We've talked about that before, that like I always use the bank as an example. I know this is probably really silly, but hang with me for a sec. I go into my physical bank when I need to speak to a banker, apply for a loan, like I need to do something that I can only do in person. I go to an ATM for a really quick cash withdrawal, like what is cash, but go with me. But I use the app for like to check my balance, to do a quick transfer. So it's still the same bank, but I'm using those different tools for very different purposes. I'm just putting you on the spot. I'm curious if you've ever seen a website where you went, that belongs on your app, or you saw an app, you're like, that is not what the app is for. That's such a website moment. And I feel like that's something that I've seen over time ago. Man, you kind of got these tools crisscrossed and what their actual purpose is. I kind of feel like that, especially, or sometimes especially in ministry, we don't even know that we kind of use a website or an app interchangeably when that's not really what they're intended to be designed for. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, well, it really comes back to your overall communication strategy, because usually what I saw was that if I'm going to download an app as a church member, there's a commitment level there, where I'm like, okay, I want this app on my phone because I want to follow up with events or sermons or whatever. Like I want to be a part of this thing. Whereas a website, I can just scroll on any website. I'm like, okay, cool, yeah. So really understanding, like, for your congregation, what roles do those tools play in the journey of discipleship, of assimilation, of becoming a part of your church, and letting it be what it is. Not that I'm against having a website that's robust enough for your members, because that's always helpful too. But just being able to be like, hey, more than likely a visitor's probably not gonna do our app unless it's like, I need it for kids check-in, and boom, I got the scanner, I'm gonna roll. Sometimes that happens, but then also that's a level of commitment that they're doing. Like, I'm gonna put my kids in your ministry, and so I'm gonna download your app. And as opposed to like, I'm just gonna kind of sit here on a Sunday morning, not meet anybody, just check it out and then go home. Right.
Yeah.
Now I need to take inventory of all my apps and see what have I inadvertently committed to.
Right.
I haven't thought about it in that way. That's actually really good.
Well, in some apps too,
and there's going to be a lot of unused apps.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah. There's a lot because, you think that's the way to go, and then you're like, oh yeah, this is more for people in a different spot than I'm at right now.
Yeah. There's a stat somewhere of like the average iPhone user has X many apps and so many that are unused, and it's like this embarrassingly large number, and you're like, oh, those crazy people, they have like 70 apps on their phone. And then you kind of just slide down, you're like, oh, I have.
Yeah.
Oh, I am the crazy person.
Okay.
Oh,
yeah,
no.
exactly. It's easy just download an app.
Now, we're on the topic of apps, and it falls in digital communication, all that. Both of you, are you like organized in the folders, like all crisp and clean and nice? Or are you the one that has like 19 pages that you flip through and apps everywhere?
I'm not answering first.
So
her answer is.
I'm more on the organized. I don't do the folders, but I'm like, this page is like, the main page is what I use the most. The next page is like interesting things. Then a page for work apps. I'm like, okay, this is gonna be helpful for work. Okay. So I do kind of have some stuff, but
Casey?
It's still pretty loose.
I started off so strong. I did. And I am a type A. We're not even going to get into Enneagram, but like organization is my love language. And I know that that's not one of the love languages, but I started so well and it just really, really went downhill. So now I just search. I'm like, I know I have an app for that, but I can't find it. So I just use the Spotlight search and find it. And I know it's embarrassing. What about you? Have to answer.
I think that's fair. I'm looking at it right now. I keep 2 pages that one has 3 rows of apps. The other one has 4, only because I've downloaded some recently and then everything else is off the home screen, and I'll search for it if I need it.
All right. So, later we can have a contest of how many pages total, and I don't want to participate.
That's awesome. Well, Jonathan, would love to ask this question. So we've talked about communication, and as you talked about earlier, like it's a part of discipleship strategy. Ultimately, like, our goal on this podcast is to help church leaders cultivate healthy churches. Like, that's what we're going after. So one thing we like to hear, especially from different vantage points around that, is in your opinion, what is a healthy church? And so for some, that's like a big question. So another way you can answer it is like, what are some essential elements of a healthy church?
That is a big question. And are you wanting more of like from a media communication perspective, or like putting on a different hat of like ecclesiology?
Both.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. I mean, the ecclesiology is a fun one.
Start with that.
Then we'll go to the other one. I have seen a variety of churches, and of the number of discipleship processes under the sun seem innumerable. And I know that the Bible does not lay out a, one discipleship model and process for all the ages. And there's a lot of cultural contextualization there. I'm a fan of a church that is able to kind of be historically connected and say, okay, hey, what has worked? I think my background has been with kind of the non-denominational Bible churches, which are awesome at being fresh and relevant and passionate and heartfelt, and maybe a little disconnected with the historical realities of church, of the fact that we've been doing this for 2,000 years. So, what were they doing, a couple hundred years ago? Did that work? Okay. But let's just use that. It still works.
Yeah.
People are still people, So I think all the ways I can answer that question, one key component is a church that kind of is historically connected and rooted and knows, hey, we're a 40-year-old church, but Christianity isn't 40 years old. We're part of a 2,000-year legacy, and that's a beautiful thing,
Yeah. That's really good. All right, then what about if you took that hat off and put on the digital communication hat?
Yeah.
Masters.
Yeah.
What's that?
The masters, the fancy pants. Yeah.
Put
that. Yeah.
Put that hat. You paid for that hat. You better wear that.
I did, right? The tassel's on the right side. Yeah.
Yeah.
From a media communication perspective, we've kind of already talked about the value of making sure your discipleship model is really clear, and you've thought through it. But another component is, and I know a lot of our listeners can relate because we've just kind of come to the COVID moment of like, what do I do? How do I communicate? There's so many PR pitfalls that churches can fall into, especially in a difficult time.
Yeah.
But good times, bad times. I think if you're, as a church, practicing good habits of communicating proactively, communicating thoughtfully and clearly, and communicating consistently, no matter what decision you make, your congregation will say, okay, saw that coming, understand why they did that. I can respect that even if I disagree with it,
Yeah.
I can think of my church that we went to during the COVID season. And honestly, we moved churches in that time and came to this church partly for that reason, because they were able to say, hey, here's what we're going to do with this situation. Here's why. And we're going to tell you again next week, just in case you forget, or the next person wasn't here. Our heart is to, care for this flock as best as we can. So this is our decision. And we were like, well, we actually really respect that. We happen to agree with it, but we also just respect that you're being so upfront about it. I know churches, I've also been on churches in church situation where they were trying to be really careful about how they talked about something, like something bad's happening. Thus and such staff member, we have to let them go because they're not doing their job. It's okay. The rest of the world understands when someone's not doing their job, they got to get fired. So you don't have to hem and haw. Just tell us they weren't doing their job and they're going to go somewhere else. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
But a church is kind of like padding it with too much PR spin. It's just not helpful. Kind of as a congregation, like, one, I see that this is spin. Two, what really happened? Like, now I'm really curious. I wasn't curious before, but now, well, if you're covering something up, it must be something,
Yeah.
Whereas you're like, no, it's not that big a deal. And so I think, yes, I've seen both sides of it. And when you can be proactive, thoughtful, and consistent, the congregation is just, it's like they just kind of all breathe a sigh of relief, like, thank you, I can handle that. I can deal with that.
Yeah.
That makes a ton of sense to me. I've always really respected transparency. And of course, we can be thoughtful with our words, but we receive that information in every other aspect of our lives, from our kids in school, from our employees, our coworkers. We say the things that we mean, and then suddenly that sometimes in a church setting, we say around the thing. Therefore, we say nothing at all. So right. I like what you're, in my words, what you're saying is speak consistently and transparently, because people are really smart. So let's speak to them like the smart people that they are. I love that.
Right. Well, proactive is also an important component, because church staff, like, we know we're about to make this decision and this is about to roll out. We're not going to surprise them by saying, here's what we're doing, and we did it. Saying like, okay, give me a little bit of lead time. Like, hey, this is what's going to happen, and this is why. We did talk about empathy earlier, and that's one way I think you can show empathy with a congregation, to say, hey, this is going to be hard for you. I'm going to kind of give it to you a little bit of time, going to get out ahead of it so that you're ready when it happens. That makes a huge difference for how people receive what happens.
Yeah.
I'm talking with you, not at you.
Yeah, for sure. Because, like, make me feel like I'm an adult, right? I can handle it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or give me the chance to handle it at least. If I have a meltdown, that's
Totally.
on me, but like give me a shot.
That's right. I'll be okay afterwards. Just give me the news.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, that's really good stuff. I think really helpful. All right, we're going to wrap up here. We have a closing segment that we do. Working title, Final Five. But, Jonathan, for you, we are going to change it to the Final Six. And I have a little surprise edition. So,
all right.
Get ready for it. All right, the first one is this. What book would you recommend to church leaders?
Yeah, I think maybe a surprise, maybe not a surprise. Definitely media communication book. One of the books that I really liked when I was in that space was Story Brand by Donald Miller. I think he published it maybe 2 or 3 years ago. All the things we've been talking about as far as like how do you get into the congregation seat, Story Brands really walks you through a framework. It's okay, what are they hearing, and kind of like why should they care about what you're saying? I think from the church perspective, it's like, well, why wouldn't you care? This is the kingdom. Like, go, you need to do that Bible study, and you need to come on Wednesday nights at 6:00 and bring your kids. Mm-hmm. Okay, but as a church person, like, I've also got soccer practice at 6:00 on Wednesday. Why should I trade? So it just kind of helps you see, like, from their perspective, what's the win? What's the loss if they don't do what you're asking them to do? So it's just a good framework.
It's good.
I like it.
Story Brand.
Number 2, what is the last thing you listened to on Spotify, Apple, or wherever your streaming services may choose to be?
Yes. We're Amazon Music junkies. It's a little embarrassing. My whole family, we just love
Little Rogue. That's all right.
Yeah, no plug there, no plug. But
yeah, this podcast is sponsored actually by Amazon. We want to thank them for. Just kidding.
Smile.
Totally kidding.
So for what we listen to is we just love Shane and Shane. I don't know if y'all are familiar with them, the local for us, but we've been following them for 20 years, man. We love them. So that's one of them. And we're also oddly on this Ben Rector kick lately. We're just rolling some Ben Rector at our house. We love it.
Good stuff.
I can support that.
Here's the additional question for you. Best or favorite or most recently told dad joke?
Scott, let's see. It's today all right, let's see what I've got here on my dad joke calendar.
Oh, of course.
Stop it. Right. You have an app for
like
that.
A true master
There's an app for that.
Well, so really, let me just this is fun. Okay, so I actually go through these and I'll keep the ones that I like and throw it. So I do have like a drawer of backups. You always got to be ready. So this is it's sad. So here's one. If you've seen one Santa, you've seen them all. You've seen them all. If you've seen one Santa, you've seen them all. It sounded better in my head, y'all. I'm sorry. That was the first time for that one.
Isn't that kind of what makes a dad joke, though?
I think that's exactly the pure definition.
And the groans that you have to have that follow.
Yes. Yeah. I was like, oh.
As a woman and a mother, I'm not sure how to participate in the dad joke segment because mom jokes aren't nearly as fun. But I have to, you guys are dudes. I have to tell you, I have 2 daughters. My 12-year-old daughter will out dad joke you all day long. And it'll just slip into conversation. She does it really covertly. So I'm driving her to gymnastics and she was like, hey, I wrote a song the other day. Actually, it was more like a rap. And it was this whole thing about a tortilla. And she just slips it in where you're like, oh, that was a dad. You just dad joked me. Wow. All right. Okay. I'm going to send her to dad joke camp with you guys.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yes.
Jonathan's going to be a counselor actually at that coming up. So
hey, head counselor, Scott.
Yeah.
Head counselor. All right. Back on to number whatever we're on. What is your favorite piece of technology?
Okay. I promise I'm not supporting Amazon, but I did just admit that we're Amazon Music junkies. So
well, this is sponsored by them, so it's fine.
I can't say her name because she's sitting right there, but Alexa, we really like. And that's probably. See, she's already talking to me. She heard me whisper her name. Golly, she's so good. She's so good, guys. She gets me.
That is
I love
awesome.
her. I love her.
We have one in main corners of our houses. We listen to it while we're doing the dishes. I'm also like a smart home geek, so I will literally like put my plugs in the right place and then program my routines. Like, all right, turn off the lights over here. Yes,
Yeah. We have
She
friends
gives
like
me
that.
advice.
We have friends like that, and we just watched their cat, or like checked in on it because they were gone. It's a little kitten, which my 2 daughters and my son we all loved it. But their home is like that. It's like everything is smart home, and it's remarkable. It's like I'm in the Jetsons right now.
Oh
The
yeah,
day that
that's
I
what it feels
talked,
like.
no,
Yeah.
it changed everything. The day that I talked to the FedEx delivery guy through the video doorbell to let him know, hey, I'm not there, but can you? I was like, this is it. I have arrived. Like,
That's
life
right.
is good, friend.
Different world.
That's right.
Different
That's
world.
right.
And she
I remember
Nice
when we
world.
got caller ID as a kid, and I thought that was crazy.
Yeah. So speaking of kids, like the generation that is being raised with the Echo Dot here, the Amazon Echo Dot. My daughter, 5 years old, we were out camping. So we're such junkies. Like when we go to somebody else's house and stay there for a long time, we're like, "Where's the music? Wish we could just play." and and so we went camping in this little cabin in Texas, and it was getting dark, and my 5-year-old daughter walks into the cabin and says, "Alexa, turn on the lights." Are you kidding?
Like,
That's
sorry, she doesn't
remarkable.
live
She
there.
knew. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Like, it's not Alexa's not omnipresent.
Someday she will be.
Yes.
Yes.
That's right. That's right.
Yes. All right. What is a quote or piece of advice that has kind of stuck with you over the years?
Yeah. Yeah. The first thing that comes to my mind is don't be an idiot.
It's good advice.
Which is only half kidding. Only half kidding. But actually, that saves from a lot of stuff. But I think for me, the quote that's kind of stuck with me, I've used it a lot over the years, is don't be afraid to kill your darlings. It's an editing quote. So when I was in college learning about writing and editing and all the fun stuff that goes along with that, they presented that quote to us like, hey, when you're writing something, and for our audience, if you're writing your sermon, sometimes it's the thing that you love the most that's actually impeding the effectiveness of your communication. So like on the website, I love that picture of so and so. Like, it's really actually kind of an awkward photo. Take it off, right? Or in that sermon, like, I really love that illustration. Like, you totally lost us. Don't use that illustration. Or it was an awkward transition. Like, just because you love it doesn't mean it needs to stay. Don't be afraid to kill your darlings.
That's good.
Man, that's good. All right, Jonathan, last question. What is one thing that you personally would like to communicate to this audience of church leaders? What's one thing that they can take away from today?
So it sounds kind of mundane. I wouldn't say write this on a cat poster or anything like that. But in the world of media communications, the thing I'd say is you get what you pay for. Because especially in a church, like, hey, I've got, Walt, the web building volunteer over here. He can build our website for us for free.
Yeah.
But we've got these people over here who are going to, cost thousands of dollars to build a website. We're going to go with Walt because he's free. That's fine. Walt might be a great person, but you're going to get a free website,
Yeah.
So as you step in that space of saying, hey, it's going to cost us some money, just know that you're going to be in a better space more than likely. Of course, obviously bet the company, but like free doesn't always mean it's better.
Yeah.
Sure.
That's good. Well, Jonathan, we appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom, sharing your experience, sharing your dad jokes, and just in general, the conversation. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on. It was a pleasure.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for listening to this episode of the Church Leadership Lab. Go ahead and leave a review. Subscribe. If you're watching this on YouTube, I think the kids say to smash that subscribe button. I think But do all those things that all the podcasts you listen to ask you to do, because ultimately we'd love to get this into more ears of church leaders to continue to help church leaders cultivate healthy churches. So thank you, and we'll see you next time.
This episode of the Church Leadership Lab podcast is brought to you by Ministry Brands, the largest provider of church technology software. Over 90,000 churches rely on Ministry Brands for their single platform solution that brings together all the digital tools a church needs. From online giving to websites to church management software and more, Ministry Brands is leading the way in simple to use, innovative solutions, all with the goal of empowering healthy churches. To learn more, visit ministrybrands.com.